The world seems to stand on the edge of a knife at the moment between nuclear destruction and towards whatever other outcome is likely to come out of the war in Ukraine, and I don't know what that is exactly. I don't know what the solution to that is. However, saying quite irresponsible things like Emmanuel Macron saying he wouldn't rule out NATO involvement in Ukraine war, like that's basically just asking for nuclear holocaust. Um, and Olaf Scholz was quite right to repudiate that or to contradict that statement the other day. And I don't know what's going to happen. I think there's going to have to be give and take on both sides. I think possibly Ukraine is going to have to step away from NATO membership, but hopefully can become a part of the EU. Um, and I don't know what the solution is. Maybe it's a European armed force to deal with Russia, but then again, that sounds like World War Three also, and not really much different to just NATO intervention in the war in Ukraine. But then again, the Ukrainians seem to be doing very well in the war in Ukraine. They seem to be repelling Russia's advances really quite effectively, and hopefully they'll continue to do so with our support. I don't know what, it's just so baffling and scary, isn't it? It's just such a situation that seems so likely to devolve into a really horrifying, massive, all-out conflict involving nuclear weapons between the West and Russia. But I think the one route to expediting the end to the war in Ukraine is to sponsor democratic forces within Russia, and forces such as the supporters of Alexei Navalny and so on, and these kind of groups that from within Russia will be able to put pressure on Putin. Since I think a lot of people have been saying recently that Putin is not undefeatable, he's not invincible. It's very possible that some organised and motivated group within the Russian state, within its political organisations, such as its spy organisations and its military, combined could defeat Putin, could poison him or something, could replace him with some leader who's more likely to run Russia in more democratic ways. And in terms of Russia, it's a really tragic thing to think about that country and to think about how, well, decayed it's become, how you might want to think of it as kind of like a country in collapse, really, and how poverty stricken it is, how stark the divide between rich and poor is, the huge problems with drugs such as crocodile and so on. And it would be a great thing, I think, to enfranchise Russia in organisations like the European Union and indeed NATO as well. I see no reason why that shouldn't happen, and I'm sure under a leader like the late Alexei Navalny, those sorts of things would be entertained, those sorts of ideas would come to the fore. And if that were to happen, that would aid the situation in Belarus with Alexander Lukashenko, and end that horrifying police state there. And it could generally fix the geopolitical situation in the West, we'd hope. But it's a troubling time, it really is. It's a deeply scary time to be alive. It's never before has there been so much at stake, I don't think, on the back of a single conflict. Even when it comes to World War One and World War Two, there was never this nuclear element to it. And even in the Cold War, there wasn't this sort of all-out war in Europe, which there is now under Putin and with Zelensky bravely fighting in the opposition. And it remains to be seen what will happen. I don't think the Ukrainians are going to give up any of their territory, and nor should they. And in terms of having Crimea back and so on, I think they should have Crimea back. And then again, is that ever likely to happen? Who knows? Who knows what's likely to happen? I think one thing that's very unlikely to happen is for Vladimir Putin to give up control of Russia and to abdicate from his king-like status of Russia, or I don't know what the correct term would be. I think it's step down, abdicate, or whatever. Yeah, I think that's very unlikely to happen. I think what would need to happen is a revolutionary movement within Russia aimed at killing Vladimir Putin and replacing him with somebody more reasonable, someone more liable to acquiesce to the demands of Western powers, someone more amenable to negotiation with the West, someone less volatile, someone less aggressive, someone less liable to push red buttons in nuclear bunkers. I think that's obviously what we need. So yeah, that would be the solution, I think, if anything. And I don't know what sort of ceasefire or treaty could come about between Ukraine and Russia at the moment, or is likely to happen in the future. In real terms, I have no idea what's going to happen. I think a lot of it rests on whether or not Donald Trump gets re-elected, and I think with Trump in the White House, he is liable to cut off support to Ukraine, come down on Putin's side because he's after being goaded by Putin, and force Ukraine to give up territory to the Russians, the Donbass region, etc. I think he's liable to, end the war in Ukraine that way, which is something that I don't really want to see happen, and no one really wants to see happen. However, that seems to me like the end to this stalemate. I don't know what that will provoke on the Ukrainian side, however. It could be all-out civil war in this kind of Russo-Ukrainian fractious quasi-state that they would seek to establish. I think Trump's presidency, if that's ever likely to happen again, and I certainly hope it isn't likely to happen again, would, bring about that sort of geopolitical scenario where the Donbass region would be Russian and would become very much like Belarus. And there would probably be a great deal of fighting still. I doubt Zelensky and the Ukrainian leadership would be liable to entertain those sorts of ideas. But if we, Britain, kowtow to the US again and stop supplying the Ukrainians with arms, who knows what the chances are of winning the war. And then there's the situation in Moldova as well that could become highly adversely affected by Trump being in the White House. That could become inflamed. The two wars, if you like, could join into sort of a single larger war. If the Russians gain territory towards Transnistria in Moldova, and that could also happen. So I think it's essential that Trump stay out of the White House. I think it's preferable that we remain in our present diplomatic stance of supplying Ukraine with weapons and so on, and aid of all varieties. And I think, roughly that. Otherwise, I have no idea what's going to happen. But what do I see a Biden presidency? I see a Biden presidency continuing with what we're doing at the moment, basically, to help Ukraine. What Trump would do is a quick and easy fix to the situation, which wouldn't be a fix to the situation at all, could well turn Ukraine into a police state, or large portions of Ukraine into a police state, could provoke massive uprisings against the Russian invaders could provoke a sort of civil war in Ukraine, which would be even bloodier than the conflict that's going on at the moment. And I don't think Donald Trump is the person we need in the White House by any stretch of the imagination to negotiate those sorts of foreign policy frontiers. So yeah, don't vote Trump if you're American watching this. Please, dear God, no. Yeah, thank you for watching everyone. Bye bye, love you lots.